Welcome to the Enjoy a Cancer-Free Life podcast with Dr. Ted Koren, best-selling author of Cancer is Natural, So is the Cure. More than care for patients, Dr. Koren transforms lives. He teaches people an all-natural way to heal from and address the causes of cancer using the tools we all have within ourselves. On the podcast, Dr. Koren interviews other thought leaders in natural healing who share insights and information to help you live longer and better.
Here we are. We're recording. I'd like to thank Mary Beth Gonzalez for joining us. She is the widow of Dr. Nick Gonzalez. You can see his picture in the background on the new book that's coming out, which Mary Beth is going to be speaking about. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited about what you're going to talk about, and I have to say that Nick Gonzalez is one of the people I so regret never having met. His breadth of intellect, his humor was, I've always enjoyed listening to him. Being from Brooklyn myself, I just recognize the New York part of him.
Right.
Fast talking, dry humor, and very insightful, witty, and very smart, and brave too. And I think that's perhaps my way of sort of introducing what you're going to be talking about. So please, why don't you jump in and tell us a little about who you are and why you're doing this and anything you'd like to talk about, because this is very exciting, because Nick Gonzalez is one of the true cancer pioneers and very humble. One thing I especially liked about him was he always gave credit to everyone who influenced him, to all of his mentors. And I regret, as you must, of course, that he's not with us today. So please go right ahead, Mary Beth Gonzalez.
Well, thank you, Ted, for the opportunity to talk about my late husband, Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, and announce the release of the new biography called The Maverick MD. You can see it sitting right behind me. And I also want to take the opportunity to tell your audience today about some of the updates regarding the nonprofit foundation, the Nicholas Gonzalez Foundation, that I started after Nick died. So if it's okay with you, should we jump in and start talking about the book?
Well, can you first talk a little bit about Nick Gonzalez and how you got introduced to him and his life's work and his mission? Because you're obviously fulfilling that mission.
So I met Nick the only way that one could actually probably meet Nick, which was in his office. And I was not a patient. And this is actually a story that's in the book. But I'm not giving away too many secrets. I met Nick because I was doing research and trying to help one of my brother's mother-in-law who was dying of cancer. And I kept Googling in New York City the different doctors who could help with her type of cancer. And this name, Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, kept coming up over and over again. So I called his office and said, we'd like to make an appointment. We'd like more information. And of course, that's not how it works in Nick's office. You have to fill out an application and then send in your files. And then they tell you whether they think that they can help you or not. Well, I just didn't think that I had that kind of time. So I marched myself over there during my lunch hour. And I just so happened to be in the hallway when one of his patients was leaving, and I just walked right in, and Nick was standing there at reception, and he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing here?" He knew I wasn't a patient. He knew that this was his lunch break. So, what was going on? And so I started telling him about my brother's mother-in-law and how much I needed help, and just, singing my little heart out about her story and asking for his help. And he said, well, I'd like to see if I can help you. Why don't you leave your information with reception? And I have to go now, but I'll give you a call and we'll get together and talk about it over dinner. And then he turned on his heels and he walked down the hallway. And I thought,
over dinner?
Exactly. That's what I thought. Did that really just happen?
How long ago was this, by the way?
So we met in the year 2000. So
20 years, huh?
20 years ago.
About 20.
And so sure enough, we eventually went to dinner. The rest of the story is in the book.
Restaurant.
And fell in love. We went to the Judson Grill in New York City. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was one of his favorite places.
Mm.
And then we had kind of a whirlwind courtship. We dated for 6 weeks and got engaged.
Now, did he, the only time you could meet him was in his office?
Well, what I mean is that that's the only place you would ever find Nick. I mean, Nick didn't go to bars. He didn't go to parties. He was very focused on his work. So at the point in which, when I met him, if you didn't meet him like on the walkway between his office and his home, you were never going to meet him if you didn't meet him in his office.
So you did the right thing.
I guess.
You knew what you were doing on some level, huh?
God must have led me there.
So you met, and I imagine, knowing the way Nick has been presented, I never met him, of course. You marry him, you marry his work.
Absolutely. And we talked about that during our courtship. In fact, I remember saying to him that when he wanted to get engaged, I said, well, where would I fit on your priority list? And he looked me in the eyes and he said, well, you would be number 2.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my goodness, like that's pretty direct. So I'm number 2 to your work. And he said, no, God is number 1 and you would be number 2 and my work would be number 3.
Oh, perfect answer. I guess you said yes.
And I said yes. So we were married for just about 15 years. And during that time, I really had a front row seat to all the trials and tribulations and all the miracles that happened throughout his work. And I became a patient myself just for preventative reasons. So I've been on the protocol now for 20 years and feel very fortunate that it has helped me not only during this horrible time of grief to have such a strong immune system, but that experience of being on the protocol myself has certainly helped me in the work that I'm doing now to further his legacy.
Did you work in his office too?
No, I was a marketing executive at various media companies in New York City, Univision, USA Network, Sci-Fi Channel, Time Inc., various companies. But I always helped Nick with the marketing for his books. And whenever he gave a conference or lecture at a conference, I would go with him and I'd either sell the books for him at the booth. And I usually wrote his presentations, and I don't mean literally like the words that he spoke. I mean like the words that were up on the screen. Because after going to a couple of his lectures when we were, just married, I realized he talks really, really fast. And I personally had a hard time digesting the information because he didn't use slides. So I said, would it be okay if I made a couple of slides just to make it easier for lame people like me to follow along? And he said, sure. But I don't actually want to be responsible for moving the slides because I'm just going to talk. And I have the way. I know what I'm going to say. I don't want to worry about the slides. So I helped him in his work by making the slides. And then I would run the projector or the computer slideshow during his presentations. And that also helped me really get a good understanding of not only his work and his protocol and how he presented it, but his colleagues and who I met at different conferences over the years.
Can you, for those people listening, watching, who are not familiar with Dr. Gonzalez, would you mind giving a little explanation of his work and his mission and what was so attractive about it to you?
Certainly. So at an early age, Nick was planning to be a writer, and actually went on to become a journalist, an investigative journalist. And then he decided to go to medical school. And through the course of early in his career, when he was working at Sloan Kettering, he discovered a doctor called Dr. William Kelly, who had claimed to have a very different type of nutritional approach to treating cancer. And Nick was asked to kind of put on his investigative journalist hat again and go down and help investigate Dr. Kelly. And not from a formal perspective, but just is this stuff for real? Like, put on your investigative journalist hat and really look at his files, and is there something to this claim that he's treating cancer and successfully? So Nick eventually did that and came to become convinced that Dr. Kelly's work was remarkable and effective, and it's completely based on different people needing different nutritional diets and supplementation. And then there's a anti-cancer effect by taking pancreatic enzymes. And so the combination of diet, supplements, and these pancreatic enzymes with significant detoxification as well, combined to become, what was the Kelly treatment. And then Nick went back to New York City, opened up his own practice, and evolved the therapy a bit to develop the Gonzalez Protocol. And throughout the course of the nearly 30 years that he was practicing medicine in New York City, he developed and wrote many books documenting his research. It was very important to him to have the scientific community evaluate this work, because he was seeing that it was working, but he actually wanted to not only give Dr. Kelly credit, but he wanted to be able to share it with the world and let other people do it, and give hope to as many people as possible who seeked out alternative treatments. And while it wasn't so fun while we were married that he was constantly writing these books, it wasn't so fun for me. I'm very thankful now to have such a huge body of work of his. In the 5 years since he died, I have since published 5 books written by Nick, 2 of which were extensive case studies, other books on the theory and the methods behind the Gonzalez Protocol.
So tell us about your latest book and your foundation.
So the new book is actually written by a woman named Mary Swander, and she's an award-winning author, poet, and playwright. And she actually was Dr. Gonzalez's patient for more than 20 years. And she approached me shortly after Nick died, and she, of course, was devastated, like all of us were when he died so suddenly.
Now, just parenthetically, he died at a fairly young age, relatively young, no?
He died at age 67, yes.
He looks so much younger, actually.
Well, that's part of the benefit of being on the Gonzalez Protocol. It has amazing anti-aging properties. I mean, people say the same thing to me. I won't tell you how old I am, but I don't look that much different than I did even 20 years ago when I started on the protocol. So Mary approached me and she asked if she could write this biography. And of course I was thrilled because she's such an acclaimed writer. So she interviewed over 50 people, friends, family, colleagues, and then she researched his life, but she also had lived his story because she was his patient for 20 years, and she'd come into the office from Iowa and have long meetings with him just as a patient, and she learned a lot about his research during that time as well. So the book is a real tribute to the work that Nick did, but it's not just a biography retelling tales of his life and this brilliant scientist, all which he, of course he was, but it really reveals the length to which the corrupt conventional medical establishment took to suppress and then discredit Nick, who was simply offering a proven cure for cancer every
Didn't
different
you
time.
actually write a book about the fraud that went on when they said they were going to investigate his work and do a scientific, so-called scientific study?
Right. So Ted, you're referring to a book called What Went Wrong.
Yes.
So as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Nick really wanted to have his work scientifically tested and evaluated. And so he sought out a clinical trial, and they conducted one, and the documented sabotage and corruption is the topic of his book, What Went Wrong, and it's heartbreaking. Mary Swander touches on it in the Maverick MD as well, because of course it was such a big part of Nick's life to have gone through this devastating career challenge, and so for those of you who buy the book, it tells the less scientific version than of what happened than Nick's book, What Went Wrong.
There was talk that Nick's death was not accidental or natural. I'd asked you before if I could discuss that with you a little bit, and you were okay with it. What would you say?
So what I'll say is that if I hadn't been there myself when Nick died, I never would have believed it. He wasn't sick. He didn't die of a heart attack, as reported by so many websites. As Mary Swander has told me when she interviewed over 50 people, all of them had a different explanation for his very mysterious death. I did not have any idea the length to which people were trying to stop his work until after he died. And so you'll see in the book the different ways that we've addressed that topic. But I am happy that you asked me the question, because there's so many rumors about that he died of a heart attack, and that was definitively ruled out.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking forward to the book. I think it sounds like it'll be a fascinating read.
I think so. I mean, people who've read it say that they like cheer him on, and they're screaming, and then they're crying. Somebody actually texted me this morning who had read the book very quickly, obviously, because they only just got it, and said, I can't believe the level of BS that Nick had to deal with. And I have even more admiration for him now. But the book explains not just, the career challenges that Nick had, but it also talks about this real David versus Goliath story, and how important Nick's Christian faith was to him, and how it helped him to be resilient, and how ultimately, with God's help, I actually believe that Nick's work is now going to go on to have even more importance than ever. And that's the reason why I launched the Nicholas Gonzalez Foundation, a nonprofit 501c3 foundation shortly after Nick died. I did not want his work to be in vain, and I couldn't just put the cure for cancer in a storage unit. I knew I had to do something with it. I couldn't let them just erase him. I couldn't let his voice be silenced. So I took action, and through our foundation, we have generated higher awareness of this nutritional approach for cancer and actually all kinds of degenerative diseases. But we're actually now educating a select group of doctors on how to specifically do the protocol, so that patients will have access to talented doctors who know the protocol and can offer his nutritional enzyme treatment.
That's what I was hoping you were going to say, because as people know, my book, Cancer is Natural, So is the Cure, discusses Dr. Kelly and Dr. Gonzalez. I don't think any book on cancer, true cancer cures, should ignore these incredible pioneers. And Dr. Gonzalez seemed very compassionate and understanding toward Dr. Kelly, who sort of broke from, he seemed to have a breakdown from all the stress that he was under.
He had a very difficult life and was incredibly brilliant. And yes, from my understanding, both from what I've read and working with our foundation to put together the curriculum for teaching the protocol, we actually had to rely a lot on the Kelly treatment, which is the basis of the protocol. So I met with several people in Kelly's original circle, and it is unfortunate what a difficult life he had.
How can people get the book, by the way? I don't want to forget that.
Oh, I'm glad you asked. So it's up on Amazon, and you can get it as a hardcover, but we intentionally priced a paperback version, which is the exact same book, for just $9.95. And so that's in Amazon.
Apart from Amazon, can they get it directly from you?
So you can contact.
How do they get it from you, rather than having to split the price with Amazon?
Right, I know. I just shipped out 300 books. So so several people did pre-order it with me, and yes, if they prefer to contact New Spring Press, they can purchase the book through me.
Oh, good.
And it's also available as a Kindle version.
Excellent. So that's newspringpress.com?
Yes, newspringpress.com. And that's the small publishing company imprint that Nick had actually started, in his lifetime, and he had published 4 books under that imprint. And then I inherited it when he died.
Sure. And what about the foundation? What is the name of the foundation? How can people reach you?
So the foundation is called the Nicholas Gonzalez Foundation, and our website is thegonzalezprotocol.com. And there's all kinds of free information there, not just like free videos of Nick either giving lectures or being interviewed, but there's also a lot of blog content that Nick wrote about specific conditions and how he treated different things like lupus or Bell's palsy, or even virus. So there's a lot of free information there. There's also information about our foundation and the work that we're doing, the research that we have in the works, and of course there's a button if anybody is interested in donating. There's a button there to make that easy too.
And I urge everybody to do so. What is the name of the website and the foundation? Just to repeat it, please.
Yes. So the website address is thegonzalezprotocol.com, and the name of the foundation is the Nicholas Gonzalez Foundation.
I urge everybody to go on the website and to donate. One of the great things that I started learning about Dr. Gonzalez from initially some of his videos. I think they were on YouTube.
Yeah, and we've linked them all together so that it's very easy to find this through our video hub right there on that website. And
I absolutely agree with you. He talked very fast. Like a typical New
Yorker. Packed a lot of information into a short amount of time.
Right. He is one of the few people I would listen to 3, 4 or more times just to pick up all the great stuff he was saying that I had to absorb. And I'm a firm believer in repetition. And if somebody you learn from, you should hear them over and over again.
Well, so it's interesting that you say that, Ted, because first of all, Nick never spoke from any notes. What he would do is basically practice his lecture and he'd memorize it. And then when he was giving it, he consciously repeated certain phrases because he thought that would help it stick in people's heads. So he believed in repetition, he believed in memorization, and and he believed in talking as fast as he could because that's as fast as his brain worked.
Can you give us some of the examples of some of the things he liked to repeat? Some mantras of his?
Mantras of his.
Wow.
I don't necessarily mean that he repeated phrases. I mean that he would repeat information so that when he was speaking, he would say things. When he was lecturing, he would often just repeat the information so that you make sure that you really understood it, because he knew he was talking fast.
I agree. The best way to lecture to people is often to say the same thing over and over again, from a different perspective, a different style. But people need it we need to hear things a lot of times to sink in through our conscious, into our subconscious. So we learn. We really learn in our subconscious. And he understood that, which is sort of nice to know. And did he travel to other countries to teach his work?
He lectured in different countries. We went to Germany together. We went to England. Before I was in the picture, I know he lectured in Israel. He only did about 1 or 2 trips a year because he really has such a busy practice, and it was, he practiced by himself. So if he really needed to be able to be there available to help with his patients, he couldn't just take weeks off on end.
What was his daily schedule like?
Excuse me?
What was his daily schedule like?
Well, he was a man of routine. So he would wake up and he would have a little bit of breakfast, always the same thing. And then he would have time to do his detoxification, his coffee enema in the morning, while he read his Bible for an hour. And then he'd jump in the shower, go off, shave, go off to work. And he would work from 10 in the morning at his desk, pretty much until 8 or 9 o'clock at night, seeing patients up until about 6 o'clock, and then starting to return phone calls from anybody who would call during the day.
Did he have time for you?
Well, he made as much time as he could. Remember, I was number 2.
But the business was number 3.
And the business was number 3. So he did make time for me. I mean, I had a full-time job too. So I was working and gone when he was, during the week when he was, had that kind of a schedule. But he would then call me when he was leaving the office, and I would make sure that the dinner was ready pretty much when he got home, and we would sit and have dinner together. And he always wanted the same thing. I tried to make different things, but he always really wanted the same dinners. Fresh vegetables, broccoli, carrots, steamed cauliflower, and either wild salmon or a nice grass-fed piece of beef. Rarely any carbs. There's always just fruit and vegetables or a salad.
Did you guys go to restaurants much?
We did. We went on the weekends, often out to brunch, or Saturday night we would go out to dinner. And he spent as much time with me as he could.
I guess you never talked about business or anything.
No, we didn't always talk about business. And I used to drag him away on vacation and kind of force him to do something, during the holidays that wasn't work. Before he met me, he routinely would work on Christmas Day in the office because he liked it. He loved how calm and serene it was in the office when there weren't office staff or patients around. So he actually enjoyed being there at night and on the weekends.
I think you are doing an amazing thing by keeping his work alive and by bringing it to the general public. And I hope you get a lot of true healers and researchers who will take his work further and implement his work. Thank you. You're to be commended.
Thank you, Ted. I had over 100 people asked to be in our educational seminars, and we couldn't obviously accept 100 people. So we do believe that we have a great and very talented group of committed doctors, and I'm very optimistic. And I saw firsthand the effect of this work, and I'm interested in making sure that it gets shared with the rest of the world.
Well, thank you. Please give us the name of the website where we can get your book and Ms. Swanson's book and learn about your foundation.
So it's Mary Swander's book called The Maverick MD, and it's at newspringpress.com, or you can buy it on Amazon. And the name of the foundation is the Nicholas Gonzalez Foundation. And that website address is thegonzalezprotocol.com.
Excellent. Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you get a lot of very excited people. I'm one of them.
Great.
And I can't wait, and I love to watch more of his videos. They really were entertaining.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity, Ted.
Oh, thank you. Let me turn off the recording part.
This show has been produced by Market Domination, LLC. To discover how you can have your own show completely done for you and turn it into a real published book and become the authority in your marketplace, go to www.marketdominationllc.com/podcast offer.